Welcome to Behind the Play, a video and podcast product of The Hoop Show that explores the lives of Geelong players past and present, as well as the off-field figures that are keeping us Geelong strong. My name is Paul James, and today I have the great pleasure to welcome aboard Anna Pavlou. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, not a problem, and yeah, very well. I guess probably like myself, you're a little bit, I don't know, are you anxious? Are you excited? Like, what's the feeling going into this Friday night? Or I guess today, as of when this episode goes, I don't know, time's a flat circle, 2020. It's still 2020, right?
Right. No, I'm the eternal, I guess, Cats realist. I'm pretty lucky, obviously. I'm only 21 and I've seen such success.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. But my dear father was born in 63 and then obviously didn't see a flag till 2007, so 44 years.
Yeah, I don't think he was going to recall much of 63, let's be real.
Oh, no, I reckon he was 3 months old at the time, so obviously didn't see a flag till he was 44, which is insane to me. So he's kind of raised me, I guess, as the bit of the realist because, you know, he's seen so much heartbreak, you know, back in the day. But
yep.
As for Friday night, I'm always nervous. It's the first time I've had a prelim in Melbourne
since 2019.
Yeah, so last time I was 18 and now I'm 21, so it feels more surreal every time, but just keen to be going. I don't like to jinx anything, so I just hope it's a good game in our favour.
Oh, look, it was only 2 weeks ago that we had Catriona Rountree on the show, and she was my unfortunate circumstance. Very fortunate, I've got two incredible kids, but because they're two very little kids, it's really struggled, stopped me from getting to the game all year. I hadn't been able to get to the game all year until the qualifying final. And she was like, when I declared that on the show, she's like, "Oh, you can't go. Like, you're not allowed to go. You will ruin this. Like, you will jinx this for us." Eventually coming down on hang on, it's a qualifying final, so if we lose, we know it's your fault. You're not allowed to go to any other finals, but it's okay. You won't have ruined it for us. Thankfully, I went and we won, and so problem solved. Nothing to worry about.
Goodness, yeah, no bad juju here.
Yeah, nothing. If we lose, it's not my fault. I can kind of wash my hands of that really quickly. But yeah, I think a bit like you. Like there's an anxiety around the whole thing. Again, like 2019 was the last time that we were actually able to see them, you know, ourselves kind of face to face. And I mean that was going well until Dusty did his thing. And I guess we don't have to contend with that this year. That's a positive. But I don't know, the Lions looked pretty especially in that second half, looked pretty impressive on the weekend, and you can't rule them out, I suppose, which is a worrying sign.
I know. I just think I think the finals buys, I mean, it just depends how the side uses it, but unfortunately our past hasn't been that positive with coming off a bye. So I think momentum, we saw it with the Bulldogs in 2016, you know, they came from 7th and just had that momentum and got a lot of players back from injury, and kind of things just went their way. So, you know, the Final Four is the Final Four. It doesn't matter where you finished in the home and away season. It's all or nothing now, really. Yeah,
it's gonna be interesting. I guess we'll know soon. And hopefully we're coming away from Friday night very, very happy indeed. Now we'll obviously get to some of the more current footy stuff shortly, but before we get to all of that, I'd love to just kind of pick through your journey and how you've kind of consumed the Cats over the years. As you mentioned, your dad was born in a premiership year, but obviously wasn't going to remember any of it, and raised you as a Cat. I mean, were you a Cat from day one? Like, or was there that usual childhood sort of tossing and turning? I like this team. This is my second team, which suddenly becomes your first team, you know, a day later. I mean, what was it like growing up in terms of consuming footy and the Cats and all that?
So we're Greek, we're Cypriot Greek. So when my grandfather migrated from Cyprus in 51 or 52, both Cats premiership years, he was in a bar one day and spoke not a lick of English and was asked, they pulled the paper up and said, "You need to pick a team." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And ended up picking Geelong because it matches, the blue and white stripes obviously match the Greek flag.
Oh, of course, yep.
So they grew up, my Bapu and my Nonna moved into Brighton and lived in Melbourne their whole lives, and the families kind of split down the middle, Carlton and Geelong, because obviously most Greeks and most Europeans would know, like my great-grandfather had pubs in Carlton, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like...
You gravitate towards a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so a broken home in my dad's family. So his sister and mother went with Carlton, and he and his father went with Geelong, and his brother, I think he's Carlton, but doesn't really matter, which helped with getting the grandkids on side later on. My bapu bribed my dad with 20 cents to be a Geelong supporter, and
20 cents.
Back in the day it was a lot of money when he was a little kid, and then
if it works.
Exactly. So the rest is history, and then he got his cousin on side, my uncle James, who he bribed with 25 cents, I guess, inflation.
Oh, raising the stakes.
I know. And they're obviously both diehards, went to, God, every game, social club members, travelled everywhere with the Cats as young kids, and then my dad married my mum, who's was a Hawthorn supporter. Shock horror, I know. My grandfather actually supported Hawthorn because he went to he's from New Zealand, so his first ever game was against Hawthorn and Collingwood, and he picked he was going for Collingwood and then realised, I may as well go with Hawthorn. So
I don't even know if you're faced with that choice, I don't know what the right choice is.
I just turned to NRL, honestly.
Yeah, change codes, exactly.
So Mum married Dad, and Dad said there will be no Hawthorn supporters living under this roof. She's pretty easy, and then I got the footy bug, basically. Dad is my idol, my hero, my best mate. So you probably see it all over my Twitter. I love him.
Yes.
And kind of everything he does, I do. So he got us on board. My brother, James, who's a year younger than me, doesn't really care, but obviously you can't live under the Pavlou house if you don't go for Geelong. So it's been I'm very blessed. Dad saw a lot of heartbreak with all those grand final losses in 89, 91, 92.
Yeah. 95 would have been a challenging one amongst the family. Obviously, you went around at that point, but
he actually walked home from the 95 grand final all the way back to Brighton from Richmond. So he was that distraught. So
it's a long time to digest it at that point, I guess.
And he always tells the story. He got all the way home, and then 100 metres from home, it started bucketing down with rain, and then stopped when he got to the door, and he goes, that was the footy gods. And then 07 happened, best day of his life.
Relief.
Oh, he was in shock, and so was my uncle and everyone who'd been through the misery. I guess a lot of people can feel that. I was only 6, so
yeah,
I was pretty blessed to think, every and obviously we went to win 09 and 11. It was every 2 years we win a flag, and
geez, for a long while it looked like 13 was going to go our way too until Sean Burgoyne popped up.
Oh, I know. But yeah, I think football's a very sacred experience. And especially supporting Geelong, it's unique because we're the only rural side, really, in the whole league, and we're the second oldest. And, going down the highway to Cardinia Park every few weeks and sharing that experience with my dad and with all my family is like the highlight of my life. Honestly, Grant, seeing 2 flags live is the highlight of my life as well. But just having that experience that kind of connects my family, no matter how old we get, is very special. And Geelong has gifted us a lot of joy. You
said you've seen 2 live. Which is the one that you missed?
I missed 07 because we got our ballot tickets, but I was 6, and the ballot tickets they put the 2 kids ones up the back on level 4. And
yeah, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah, right, exactly. So they ended up going to my uncle and auntie, and then 09 we sat just behind the cheer squad, and then 11 I can't believe it, we got 8 front row seats in the back. It was unreal. Yeah, and I was very young, obviously, at the time. I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, but I have very, very vivid memories of bawling in my dad's arms after 09, and yeah, it's something I crave all the time. Every time I see a club win a flag that's not us, I'm like, oh God, I remember the days, and you always, that's what you want, exactly, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the 44 years of pain before 2007. I had about 18 of them at that stage, but I still remember sitting in the crowd that day in complete and utter shock. Like, I mean, I was born in 89, so a bit like I didn't really know anything about what had happened that year. And even by the time we lost our, I guess at that point, most recent one in 95 against Carlton, that's one of the first footy memories I have, and obviously it wasn't a particularly good one. So, very quickly just disappeared to go kick the footy myself and hope that one day I was going to be able to get out there and fix things. Clearly didn't. But, I remember kind of 2004 was that point where things started to kind of turn. That was a good year for the Cats. I guess coincidentally, like, we played Brisbane in the prelim. Hopefully the result isn't the same this week. But that was when I started realizing, hang on, this team, there's something about it. And now obviously 05 and 06 we faced our challenges, namely a semi-final that breaks my heart still to this day, and I'll never speak of the person responsible for that moment.
It's funny. It's actually funny because I work with him now, and he's the most lovely person I've ever met. But he will definitely give you crap for that game that shall not be named.
Yeah, Ben's suggesting that one day we try and get the man in question on the show, and I just insist that it will be the worst piece of content this outlet ever produces, because I just don't know if I can look at him in the eye without crying.
Literally, because obviously he lives in Sydney, but he does a lot of work in Melbourne for SEN. I remember texting my dad being like, "Oh my God, he's here." He's like, "Don't talk to me. Don't talk to him. You're a better Geelong supporter than this." It's very funny, but yes, I was young, but I still feel the pain of it.
Yeah, but I guess in spite of all that pain, I guess, I mean, you would obviously recall parts of that as well. But then it makes moments like 2009 or 7, 9, 11 all the sweeter. And hopefully, even with the, I mean, it's not been to the same scale. But we've obviously experienced plenty of heartbreak over the last decade, even. Hopefully, that will make what is hopefully a 2022 premiership all the sweeter as well. So,
fingers crossed.
So, how did the love of the game at such a young age and the love of the Cats end up blossoming into this career that you are building at such an incredibly rapid rate? Like, I mean, obviously we've touched on SEN, which is where you're currently working now. You're studying. You've only, as we were talking about before the show, you've only got a few weeks left. But your credits are long outside of all of that as well. Like, you've been involved in cricket, in footy, in multiple different levels across both of those sports. SEN is obviously such a broad thing as well. You're covering so much there. How are you notching up all these credits so fast? It's an incredible job.
Thank you very much. You've done your research. No, I think I was 6, and I've always had a passion for writing, and I think it was kind of switched. I thought, well, I love sport. I love footy. I love the analytics, I love the numbers, but I also really like the stories of the game. And I just thought, yeah, I'd do some sort of sports journalism. And Of course, back then it was just writing in the paper. No social media really existed. So I guess I've been very fortunate enough. I just remember being told in primary school, oh, the papers will die, you won't get a job. And that was fine because social media was growing and club content from, within AFL or cricket clubs or whatever was really rising to the top. Websites, TV, radio. So, I kind of decided my mum is a very hardworking lady, and she's always been really good at pushing us to follow our dreams. And I think that's something a lot of children aren't afforded, but my brother and I are very lucky. We're both following the exact paths we want to go down, and with such support from our parents. So, started a website when I was 16. Oh, actually, no, I used to write for the Footy Almanac back in the day.
Yep.
John Harms was one of my early mentors. And I just liked writing about what footy meant to me, as an 11-year-old would, Yeah,
the nature of it allows you to get a bit more personal and introspective.
That's what's always drawn me to doing sports media is the stories. I love to analyze the game, and it's great to meet like-minded people about that. But, when I really got into it when I was 16, started my website, I got to interview Daniel Menzel once. Like, that was my first interview. And, it wasn't about everything, all the games and the stats. It was about his journey, which obviously is very well documented. But to be able to feel like you're still able to tell a bit of that story kind of got me hooked. And my dad always says he thinks I was put on this earth to be able to tell people's stories, which I'm definitely trying to do, like wherever I end up. But I've been
here you are on the other side with me trying to do a very similar thing to you tonight.
Oh, you're doing a very good job. But I'm not used to being the one answering the questions. I like to ask them. But kind of continued doing that kind of stuff. It's really all about getting your foot in the door. I interned a bit with St Kilda kind of when I was in year 12, and then obviously the pandemic hit, so it was a bit rocky. Yeah. And it was just like, I'm very lucky. I've had a lot of mentors over the years who just say, push yourself for things that you just think you won't get because your name will be on their radar.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I did when I applied for a job at Cricket Australia over the summer. And I was like, I was not qualified, but I kind of was like, you know what? something could come from this.
You're demonstrating the enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was like, yeah, I've always had the mentality of like the worst they can say is no. So I never was like, yeah, whatever. At least my name's on their radar. And then I got a call saying, well, you didn't get the full-time job. And I was like, shock horror. But we'd like to offer you a 6-month contract over the summer to cover, you know, the Ashes.
And how do you digest that? Because it's the Ashes. That's the really the biggest thing in cricket.
I was like, this is Anna Pavlou, right? You've got the right person. But
you haven't got the wrong number.
I'm sorry, no, but they were just like, we've seen your stuff. And obviously a lot of the stuff that I've done over the years is volunteer because that's just the way
you've got to do.
The industry. Exactly. So it was kind of like a shock. It was a very, very intense 6 months because obviously cricket kind of goes in just like big chunks. I guess like all sport does. It's not really a 9 to 5. It's not a 365 day a year job. It's like basically I didn't get any time off at Christmas. I was on call on Christmas Day, worked the Boxing Day test, covered most of the Big Bash and the Women's Big Bash. And it was just like, sometimes I felt out of my depth, but I was like, well, I wouldn't ask you to be here if they didn't think you could.
I wonder, like, at the same time, I wonder if, I mean, you're covering so much cricket. There's a basically, especially when you combine the women's and the men's and tests and Big Bash and one days and all those sorts of things are going on. There's almost cricket of some form of significance every single day. Do you even get the time to necessarily really contemplate those sort of things and have the time to digest the feeling that you're out of your depth, or maybe feeling like you're out of your depth, I should say?
I think it was just like especially coming out of the pandemic, like I had a pretty crazy 2 years. Obviously, all I was focusing on was just doing uni study and just like looking after my grandparents and my grandma who was sick. That was basically my whole thing. And then to have to give that up was very difficult but that's all that everyone's ever wanted for me was to get the gig. Get the gig, exactly. So, and at the same time, I got offered my initial job at SEN, which was literally I got offered the Cricket Australia job and the SEN job within 2 days of each other for the weekend news reading gig at SEN. So I said,
it's a lot.
Well, all right. I've just gone from literally sitting in my bedroom for 2 years to now. It wasn't full-time work, but I was casual at both, and I was working most days a week.
Yeah.
So I'd do a Friday night Big Bash shift and finish at about 2:00 in the morning, and then 4:00 in the morning I'd be at SEN doing Saturday news. So it was a very intense cycle, and I didn't have a lot of time to reflect
sleep.
Yeah, I feel like I've aged a lot. God, that feels like ages ago. It's been almost a year since I was at Cricket Australia. Started at Cricket Australia, but it was just like as I said, I didn't have the time to sit back and think. It was just like get as much done as you can, impress the people, learn as much as you can, because I obviously had a contract with Cricket Australia, finished just as I began my last year of uni in April or March. So I was like, get as many contacts as possible, get as much as you can, written, audio, video, just experience it because it'll come to an end very quickly, which of course it did. And I thought, all right, cricket will finish. I'll just be worrying about study during the week and then weekends on SEN, which I was definitely, it was a big sacrifice because obviously I'm only 21 and I've always said I'll continue to give up what I have to give up to keep striving towards, things. So that was kind of coming to it. I was like, I'm missing so many 21sts, and I was going to a 21st and I was leaving at 9:00. I'd do a speech. I'm like, anyway, sober, gotta go. So I felt like I was missing out a bit of that, but again, it was something I had always said I'd do. So it kind of came at the perfect time that SEN offered me full-time work as the morning newsreader, so national morning newsreader for 5 days a week, 5 mornings a week.
No small deal.
No small deal. And I thought, and I originally went, oh no, I've got to finish uni. And I thought, well, why not, right? I've already taken on so much and I proved I could do it. It was difficult, of course, but I'd never stopped and I never, needed to rethink anything. So I said, sure. And then kicked off, did my uni placement with Carlton at the same time. And then footy season started, and it's just been, whirlwind ever since, and I don't get a break, but I love it because I'm engrossed in sport every single day, and I've met some
Which is the dream.
people. It is, and my dad always goes, "You're living my dream," and he goes, "Oh, how's this person?" And it's unreal at only 21, I guess. I'm very I don't take for granted that I'm in this position and that I get to see how all these fantastic media people who are the talent and who are behind the scenes put together products, and nobody knows how hard. Like, you'll get a lot of hate online and you'll get horrible messages in your DMs and stuff. And the thing that kind of keeps you going is that there's a group of people, whether they're the producers, the panel operators, the talent, the people working in TV, the people working in the digital team, they get it. Yeah. So like, you never really feel like you're alone, which is awesome. And I guess just like at the end of the day, you get to cover sport and news and be the one who gets to break those big stories, and it's just unreal.
Yeah, and I think the thing that can get lost, and I guess tell me what you think about this as well. I mean, we were talking before the show, and I think a lot of people kind of know anyway, that and anyone who's watching it can probably tell from the background as well. There's like all the video game stuff that I do there, and unfortunately you cop a lot of negative rubbish as well, because people on the internet can often suck. Not all people, but they can suck. And I'd imagine, again, similar sorts of unfortunate, horrible sort of people exist in sports land as well, and will say, and do horrible things. But the thing that I guess I've kind of learned over the years of doing it, and again, tell me if you think it's kind of same or different or anything like that, but I feel like that those people really represent like 1 or 2%. Like, they are such a small number, and the bulk, like the people who enjoy what you put out there, whether it's written word, whether it's podcast, whether it's live on radio, television, whatever it happens to be, most of those people sit in silence, and it's not because they don't enjoy it. It's actually because they completely enjoy what you do, and they just love immersing themselves in the content itself. And it's the squeaky wheels, it's the horrible people out there, it's the people who've got too much time on their hands, whatever the case happens to be. They're the ones that put the horrible comments out there, but they're the ones that can stick and get in your head. And it's trying to think back on the good, like the majority actually really like what I'm doing, and they're just silent, which is unfortunate. But I get it.
100%. That is like the most accurate way to put it, because like there are so many people that would be like my dad, who I grew up listening to SEN and I've consumed it forever, and they've had lots of changes there, but my dad always enjoys the content that happens. And he's not one to go on social media and say, or call in. Wow, what or call into the station. Thank goodness. Dad, please don't do that. Love you, but don't do that.
Please do it.
But he will never tweet going, wow, that was fantastic, because he doesn't feel like he needs to get that approval, because he knows, he's comfortable the way he thinks. But I actually got a lovely handwritten letter actually delivered to my desk a couple of months ago now.
That's nice.
And one of my bosses said, "Oh, it's fan mail," and I was like, Anyway, I opened it. It was an interesting letter that said something like, "You say the word hour wrong," and like, I got in my own head about it, because like 6 guys had signed it, no return address, and I was like, oh wow. And it kind of, for the first time, I was like, I'm not an influencer in any way, I'm not a celebrity, but I was like, oh, people think
but I'm having an impact.
I'm having an impact. And I was like, righto. I thought it was hilarious. And everyone, obviously, there are some massive names at SEN who get hate on the text machines every minute. Like, it's just part of the job. But I think it was the first time, because I've got hate online and I've got hate in my DMs, because I'm pretty used to the social media scene. I'm young. It's been my whole life.
You've known it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's never really bothered me, because everyone's really accessible, and I open myself up on social media. So if you open yourself up, you have to expect that not everyone's going to like you. But getting a handwritten letter was the most weird experience. I was like, oh my God, like they took the time to write this out and get 6 men to sign it and
comment on how you said hour.
And then literally for like the next 3 weeks, I was like, how do I say this word? I asked my family, and they're like, okay, you need to relax. And that was probably the only time I've ever really got in my own head about the way, obviously I don't sound like this when I present news, but and then I kind of realized, okay, that's, yeah, as you said, it's like the 1% of the people who took the time to do that.
But it can be a real challenge at first, I think, for anyone. Maybe that was the case for you as well. It can be a real challenge at the first time these things come along. I mean, hopefully the worst of it is you going, wait, is that how do I say out? Like, and kind of stewing on it and trying to listen to yourself as you say it. But I mean, there is obviously some truly horrible stuff that can get said from time to time too, and hopefully you haven't dealt with any of that. But I mean, we know that sort of thing exists, and I mean, yeah, it can be a real challenge for people at first, and hopefully anyone out there in a similar sort of position who potentially is even dealing with that right now is able to, I guess, yeah, keep in mind that group is such a minority, and that everyone else is there because they love what you do. They think you're fantastic, and try and push through that stuff as easy as it is to say. I think if people can kind of push through that stuff and remember that actually the good people are out there, and they're the ones that are just sitting there very contently reading, watching, listening.
I think that
really
might
help.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. I think like being in the industry with such big names who have such controversial opinions, I took that to, like, I showed them the letter and we had a good laugh about it. They're like, this is fan mail. Like, don't you worry about the stuff, some of the stuff that we get. And I think it, like, if you find the people that understand, it can put into perspective. And at the end of the day, you've got your biggest fans. My dad hasn't missed a bulletin, I don't think, since I started my job. So if there's any other problems, he'll always let me know. So otherwise, yeah, I've got I think my Twitter's really helped. I tried to grow that before I kind of got into the industry. So I guess when I hit the industry, like I have a little bit now, it wasn't a shock to people. And it wasn't a shock to me, more so because I try and put, my opinions about footy each week and that kind of stuff, which started terribly, but ended up being
It always does though, right?
Oh yeah, my dad said, you do your top 5 takes every week and pick 5 big moments that you think were the best. And I said, that's the dumbest idea ever, but okay. And the first one I did was obviously the first round of AFL, and I forgot the Shane Warne tribute, and I forgot Sam Doherty's return from having cancer, and I got ripped apart. And it was just genuinely, I forgot. And I was like, oh, Dad, this is terrible. And he goes, just wait it out. And it's got like, I've got a few people who every week will give me their takes, and it's turned into this really positive thing where people, I think that's another thing as well. People take a long time to understand things as well when they see it on social media, when they're consuming radio, news, TV, whatever.
Well, I think like even with what you're talking about there, you're trying to celebrate positive things. You've put a cap on it being 5, but that doesn't mean that there's not more positives out there. Now, obviously, yeah, maybe Shane Warne and Shane Doherty, like Sam Doherty, sorry, like they're different sort of cases, and yeah, look, maybe it was an accident missing them, but
it was a long round. Okay, it was the first round.
There's a lot going on, but it doesn't prevent others from jumping in a comment and saying these are fantastic as well. I'm not saying you're wrong, but just like these were awesome too. These were my favorites, and it's a dialogue that builds, and it just becomes kind of dogpiling of a really positive sort of sense. And
yeah,
I'm glad that's kind of what it's becoming for you as well.
That's how it started, and then I was always putting at the bottom, like, give me your moments, like, please be kind. And then people kind of caught on, and those, negative supporters who, just sit on Twitter to talk badly about their club and anything that gets in their way, kind of weeded out when they just realized no one was having it. And the ones that people were responding to were the ones that were really positive. Someone would go, great takes, Anna, my 5 are, and it'd be this like one-eyed Collingwood supporter. And that was awesome, because I was like, great, that's your 5 takes of the week. Yeah. My 5 takes will usually include Geelong. But it was never, and it's kind of turned
no idea why.
No, shocking, but it's really hard to like not be.
Let your bias creep in.
I know, I try not to, but I guess working at SEN, everyone still has their bias, their teams, and will wear their scarves and colours with pride. So
yeah, I mean, you're regularly on shows with Kane and Kingy, for example, and they're not shying away from where their allegiances lie.
Oh no, and I'm not either. When I get to talk on there, they always go, "Why don't you do Geelong games?" And I go, "Because I'm too nervous. I love them too much. It stresses me out. I don't want to touch the Geelong stuff, so I don't usually." So yeah,
which is still, I guess, an interesting comment. And I guess there's a potentially difference with with your path in versus naturally what their path is, which is coming at the thing as ex-players, because I guess it's just expected. Of course, they're going to have a little bit of bias there. They played for them, whereas yours is like, I love the club. I haven't played for them, but I love the club. And so I guess I can see that mental sort of barrier there. But yeah, I guess they're always going to have that bias towards their own clubs. Just throw all that Geelong stuff out there. It'll be awesome.
Well, there's not many, as I've said, there's not really many, except for Jared, who's fantastic and one of like my sports media heroes. He's just fantastic. But apart from him and Hutto, who's only ever in a few days a week, there's not many other Geelong supporters, especially the back end people. We've got a lot of Melbourne, Hawthorn, Carlton. That was a long season. You'd see them decked out every Monday, and when they went on their winning streak.
Very quiet come finals time.
Oh look, there's a lot of bets behind the scenes, or there's a few I hate putting on, I'll wear a Hawthorn scarf if you beat us. God no, my dad would disown me.
I've had one bet like that with a mate, and fortunately I won. So he was trotting around in a Geelong scarf, and that was fine.
See, that's great. It's great when it works, but then we lost to Hawthorn this year, so it's just.
I've also got another one that owes me 2 slabs of beer from about 10 years ago. At this point, he still hasn't paid up.
This is the video to follow that up right now. Yeah. No, but it's fantastic. Like that, I think that's the thing about working in sports media. If you're not a past player or a coach or whatever, the people that work there just love sport. There are people who are just the panel operators and the producers who just got into it because they love talking about sport. And it feels like, obviously I'm a newsreader, but obviously a lot of it's sport based as well. It doesn't really feel like you're working, because you have to go in and you talk to players and coaches and people who just want to talk sport all the time. And it's
pretty awesome.
It's all I've really ever wanted, just to be around like-minded people. I just don't think I could have done anything else in my life.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's even a fascinating one for me, and I guess it's something that's kind of even just built a little bit as this show has kind of built over the course of the year. But I've got people who are, and I will not be outing them, but I've got people who knew a lot about what was going on at Essendon, the people that I work with, who knew a lot about what was going on about Essendon, who know a lot about what's going on with Carlton and the like Liam Stocker and all those sorts of things that's rolled up Carlton fans lately. And I was hearing all these, like I was hearing little bits and pieces from them, and I was like, I don't need to put this out there. I just love like getting to have these conversations with people about what's going on, and they've got a level of education on this thing because they're either networked to people involved or they are directly involved themselves, and it's really, really fascinating to be a part of. And I just love having these conversations and them realizing like, he's not going to spill the beans. Great, let's just talk. It's been awesome. I absolutely am adoring having this at the moment. So
yeah, it's crazy. Like, kind of being the first ones to be able to break news as well. Like, because we've got some fantastic journalists in there who, they're in at 5 a.m. making calls. It's just beyond me, and they've got their connections, and it kind of makes us like one of the stronger, sporting outlets, especially with obviously our radio content is comes first. So, actually it was when Alistair Clarkson signed with North, I saw it pop up on my Twitter because I was sitting at work, and I ran into the studio because obviously we're next door to each other, and I was like, because I'm listening to the stream as I go through the day, and I'm like, Clarkson just signed, and they're like, run in and tell them. And I'm like, on air, they're like, run in now and drop your phone on the desk for Kane or whoever else and tell them. And I was like, so it's just like, it's really surreal getting like, obviously I wasn't the one to break the news, but
but you're breaking it. Yeah, you kind of, in a way. Yeah,
it's just like, that's always been something I've always wanted to do, to be the first to know something. And it's really cool because we obviously get, there's a lot of speculation, but we've got the journalists who get the stories out first, which is always like, it's pretty nice that we broke that, or we knew that well in advance. So that's another cool aspect of the job.
What was it like? And I guess this is before the SEN side of things, but what was it like? I mean, you've got your love of the Cats, and yet you're working at the Saints, you're working at Carlton. I mean, how do they process the fact she's not one of us? Like,
it was actually hilarious because my boss at St Kilda was actually a diehard Geelong supporter.
Oh.
So it was fantastic. Dave O'Neill, who's not there anymore, and when
they couldn't at that point.
They couldn't at that point. It was enough. After 2009, I think they have
too much of this bias
like us, literally. But
They keep reminding us about 2009. This is awful.
oh, I don't want to think about it anymore. But yeah, and when I told him, because obviously in a lot of sporting organisations, there's no news channels on. It's just Fox Sports all day. So I mean, at SEN, obviously in my area, I've got a bit of everything, but we've just got big screens all day playing footy, old matches, like whatever. Like you'll have, David King sitting doing his breakfast show, and then outside his studio window is like him the night before on like 360 or something. So it's just like a lot of media, AFL and sport media consumed. But at the Saints, kind of made my little allegiance with Dave, and I was working there just through the AFLW season just before the pandemic hit. So they were just doing a lot of replays of like games, and then every time a Geelong game would come on, I'd be like, come on, let's go watch it. And we'd always like sneak off into one of the boardrooms and like analyze the game. It was great fun. But again, working at any club, the people there have a passion for it. That's a unique thing about sports media, and I guess media in general is that really sports media, like people work there because they love the club or the organisation or the people or the sport, which is really unique compared to any other job, I guess. That's why I quite like it, because all I want to do is talk sport. I'm pretty one-dimensional. I just like to talk about any sport.
That's fine by me. It's making for an awesome show today.
Thank you. So it never really bothered me, especially I've got family. Obviously, Carlton is my second team, or I guess you could say I like the Swans as well. I think they've got a fantastic culture, but Carlton because of family. And
we don't like Sydney at the moment, though. We have to
not until it's all done.
End of September,
maybe in October. We'll see what the results are.
We can forgive them potentially. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, but when I was at Carlton, it was I was texting my nonna, and I was like, and for her it was a big thing because Princess Park, and my auntie as well. That's where they watched all their football growing up, and my dad as well, because they couldn't get to Geelong when he was quite young because they were living in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So I think I got to live a bit of an experience for them, and it was when I was there, they were always so excited to see what I was doing. And even at St Kilda, who, I mean, I guess my family did grow up in Brighton, so around a lot of St Kilda supporters. Yeah. They all, they went to Linton Street to watch games. They went to the Junction to watch games. So it was just, and it didn't matter who you went for, because everyone there just had some sort of connection to sport. And I guess when I was there, obviously I wasn't at full time at either. It was just for internships for uni. But they were always like, "Oh, you'll find if you're here, if you're at a club long enough, you'll align to them and you'll want them to win when they actually play your team one day." And I was like, that is the most insane thing anyone's ever said to me. And I can tell you, when Geelong played Carlton, obviously I was going for Geelong. When Geelong played Kilda, obviously I was going for Geelong. But
let's hope no one gets hurt, but otherwise.
Yeah, I was like, it doesn't have to be a blowout, but as long as there's content for both teams. But obviously that's one thing I don't think I could ever, unless I don't think I could ever
understand it either. Were those people speaking from experience when, like, I used to support, such and such, but now I'm a Saints?
The thing with Dave, who was obviously a Geelong supporter, is he one of his points was, I've seen the three flags and now I want the Saints to win. And I guess when you're entrenched in it 5 days or more, 6 days, 7 days a week, when you're working in AFL media, like he was always like, I'm obviously supporting Geelong, but it makes our job easier when we win. And it made total sense to me at Carlton, because I was happy that Carlton had a more successful year than previous, but it just made everybody's job easier on a Monday and a Tuesday. There was more content, more people were engaged. Because I don't think...
Yeah, I follow.
Yeah, because obviously...
Not as many people come out for a loss.
Oh, God, no. We were doing the weekly emails after a loss, and you'd get half the amount of people opening it compared to when it's a win, and it's much easier to get content out of it. And I think it made sense. I don't think it was that people were changing their sides. They were just more like, it makes my job easier, which makes total sense to me. But,
I mean, there's kind of if Geelong can't win for whatever reason, if we're not going to win this year, then I'll be okay with it if St Kilda or Carlton win.
Yeah,
but otherwise, Cats all the way.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, obviously things are tracking, as we've already discussed, tracking incredibly well with SEN and everything you're achieving in that space. And obviously that's a very generalist sort of role. But is there a desire at any point to get involved more on a more specific Cats-based level?
I think I've been pretty lucky that I've been afforded experiences. I kind of guess on like both ends of the spectrum of sports media. Like being in a club is completely different to being kind of talent and being involved in like broadcast journalism. I think it was really handy that I was working at a club in Cricket Australia, an organisation, as well as SEN at the same time, because I was just getting completely different
both sides of the fence
ideas. And I personally, as a child, I was always like, I'd love to work in a club. I'd love to just do that stuff. But then kind of like, I've got the radio bug. I've got the broadcast bug. I'd love to go to television. I think that'd be awesome. Kind of doing something like a Sarah Jones or something like on Fox. I think their job's really awesome. And I feel like I've got enough knowledge that I could, I guess, if I ever got there, like I'd kind of not feel out of my depth, kind of going into those conversations, because all she does is, you know, she'll pose the questions. And then obviously they've got the experts, they've got the David Kings and the Gary Lyons and whoever answering the questions, but she's the one who sets it up. Yeah. And again, there's a fair few of them who do that kind of Daisy Pearce, all that kind of stuff. That would be, I always thought Clubland, and I'm never going to rule it out. I think in this day and age, you have to be able to do everything in sports media. I remember at the start of our degrees, our teachers were like, at the end, you're going to have to decide. And I was like, decide what path, like which side of sport media you want to go down. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, and I think when it came to the start of my last year this year, it was like, well, I've had experiences in both, and I'm not going to close the door on ever working.
Yeah, it's a transferable skill set.
Oh, 100%. And if, you know, I've worked in radio, which can help with moving to television, but I've also worked at Cricket Australia with back end of websites and football clubs who use the same kind of stuff. So the thing is, you have to know how to do everything. You have to be able to, you know, at SEN, where, you know I'm learning how to produce as well. I'm learning how to, you know, panel up. I've done local radio before, so I know how that kind of all works. And then I guess like working in a club, and then, at SEN as well, we're expected to produce digital content. If I want to write a story for the website, I can do that. You know, they're pretty transferable skills because there's not a lot of people at the moment due to the pandemic. So it's like we're working extra hard to get as much content out as possible, which is great for the young people in the industry. There's a lot of young kids in the digital team who do all the writing and stuff, but, you know, they'll come down and produce for a day, or they'll show me how the website works another day. So, yeah, I feel like the industry is so intertwined that you can move from a club into radio to television, back to a club, you know, to coaching, whatever you really want, if you've got the knowledge. Yeah.
And if you're willing to throw yourself at it, all of yourself at it, then, that stuff should, I'm not going to say happen easily, but like there are those transferable skills that can make it a lot easier.
The opportunities definitely come, but you've got to be able... you've got to put 100% in. That's something I've always tried to do, is just like, you can't half-ass anything, you know, can't put half an effort in because it'll get picked up, you know.
Absolutely. It's a real challenge like that. Yeah, you really have to commit wholeheartedly, and I mean, that's clearly what you've done to get to this point and continue to do, and I think it's paying off incredibly for you, and hopefully the dream of featuring in a Sarah Jones style role on TV does become a reality, because you are doing an incredible job.
Thank you. Very kind of you. Pumped up my tyres a lot tonight.
I do what I can. So cycling back to the game, the Cats, the current day sort of stuff, we were talking about breaking news. Berry got off. So you know, we can kind of factor that into our conversation now. How do you feel? I mean, especially with that little bit of context there, we kind of lightly touched on it before. How are you feeling about this weekend? Can we get the job done? And who do you expect that? And then obviously these finals have been up and down and all over the place. But who do you expect will play if we get through?
I think in the grand scheme of things, this is the best chance we've had as a squad to push for a flag in about 10 years.
Yeah, I'd say since 2013, yeah.
Yeah, since about 2013, I agree with that. there's a lot, just more generally, there's a lot more buy-in, and you've heard it from the content that Geelong's putting out. They're playing like they're all going to get dropped every week, which I think is a mentality we haven't had for a long time. Oh, I mean, I think we've always had it, but they've really elevated it.
Yeah, it's another notch. There's depth there that's creating it.
I don't think it'll. I don't think it'll be an easy win either way for us or Brisbane. I think they've got literally nothing to lose, and they had a rocky season, and I personally think they would have finished top 4 if they just kind of won a few of those games. We only beat
games
them
against Essendon, for example, or whatever. Yeah.
We only beat them by what? A few points.
A goal, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was, and it's been like that for a few years when they come down the highway. So, they're a side like Sydney that matches up extremely well against us, irrespective of where we are, ladder position, how well our seasons are going. I think Brisbane will be really hungry, but I just think I don't want to jinx it. I'm going to cross myself.
I'm touching this. This is a wooden desk. I'm touching wood for us.
I just think if we can take Neil out of the game, obviously, there's no way the rest of their midfield stands up to it. I think I think one thing that people forget with Melbourne is that they actually had a really poor second half of their season. They were 5-8 or something, whatever they were.
And they absolutely played like that team in the semi, as opposed to the 10-0 team from the beginning of the year.
Exactly. So I think, we can give Brisbane credit for that, but realise that if we come in the stellar form that we have been playing in the home and away season, I think we've got a better chance. But we can't start like we did against Collingwood because, we actually don't have a second chance this time.
Yeah.
And the way we played, go.
Oh, sorry. That's the issue we've had, obviously, with several. I mean, I think about 16 where Sydney got us in that prelim. They smashed us in that first quarter. And that one has. I think I've spoken about it on the show already. That one's continued to blow up in my face because I got pulled over by ABC on the way into the ground. They asked my thoughts on the game, and we'd had players coming back. They had a few that were coming back from injury and a bit sore, and I was very confident in myself and the Cats that night. And that circulated a lot amongst my friendship groups afterwards when we got obliterated in that first quarter. But I guess my worry is exactly what you've just highlighted there, because we still kind of had that against Collingwood in that first quarter. They didn't put us to the sword like we did in those occasions, and I think that is reflective of the structure that we've now got around the field and the strength of the team. But their forward line, I mean, they've obviously got some weapons like a Jamie Elliott and those sorts of guys, but they don't run as deep as Brisbane. So if we allow a lapse like that to happen, even for 20 minutes,
we're blown
it's not
out.
to say we can't win, but we can't allow that to happen. They need to be switched on from moment one.
I think the unique thing about Brisbane is that they're like West Coast of that 2018, where they have a traditional big forward line. Yeah. Ours is unique because Cameron can play both roles as a tall and
a midfielder these days.
Yeah, he's agile like a small. It's fantastic. But they've got Hipwood and Danaher, and they've got this structure that rarely fails, and I think that's it's unique to see that now, because there's a lot more reliance on midfielders and small forwards to create the opportunity. That's how Melbourne won their flag last year. They really relied on mid to small forwards, and I think that's
Fritches and Cosy Pickett's.
Exactly, and I think that's how Richmond did the same thing. Is they just killed sides with those smalls. I don't think they particularly played a fantastic brand of football, but they had.
No, it was very ugly, actually.
It was. Okay, let's be honest, it was terrible, and I'm devastated that, we couldn't snag any flags in that era, but it worked. No one could figure it out for 3 or 4 years. But I think Brisbane have that traditional game where we're forced to 100% lock down defenders who Blix can't, if we're going to use Blix, we can't have him going third man up or running the lines. And that means we really have to,
There's accountability.
Exactly. And we have to pray that Stanley, holds up, because,
McInerney's back.
Exactly. So we're actually, because they beat Richmond without a ruckman, and that was still a fantastic performance. So I think it's as you said, it's accountability and knowing that we may not be able to play that free moving style as much as we have been, which has been such a refresher for our game.
It's been beautiful, hasn't it?
Oh, it's enjoyable to watch. It's shades of '07 stuff where it was just full on footy all the time. So, the accountability, I think it'll be a shake up, and I think we have to kind of revert back to realizing that they're more of a traditional old school football side, because they're not just relying on. And also, if you count Lincoln McCarthy, who can also play as a tall, he's pretty dangerous as well. So we've got to do.
We know full well what Link's been able to do to us over the last few years since he left.
I know. One of the ones that got away, but again, you can't change it.
You can't begrudge him. He couldn't get a game. He couldn't get his body right, and it somehow worked out for him. Something about the Queensland air, maybe.
I know, right? It worked out for a few of them, but
yeah, cockatoo as well.
Yeah. I just think, we've got to be prepared to know these players have to be on lockdown roles more so than their freestyle. But we've beaten them a few times before, and I think Chris Scott's masterwork has actually helped us in the close games.
Yeah.
2 years ago we wouldn't have beaten Collingwood in that qualifying.
Absolutely,
Yeah, there's just something about this side that's accountable, and we can go to this next level. It may not be pretty, but we've got it in us, and that kind of gives, I think, everyone a bit more hope for what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, again, like the Collingwood one, like they got the jump on us, but because of the way we play now, because there is that understanding of what needs to be done, they were able to clamp things down quicker. They kind of they didn't wear Collingwood out, but like they took all the punches, and then they ground their way back into the game. And I mean, my thought going into that game was we were going to win by about 20 to 30 points. And ultimately, from about the 20-minute mark of the first quarter, that's exactly what we did. It's just not the ideal start in that particular instance. I think when it comes to Brisbane, that accountability is super important. I think you're 100% right. I think one of the beautiful things that we've got now, and it's something that Cats fans are really starting to wake up to this year, is the importance of Zach Guthrie at the moment. He's taking so much of that Tom Stewart role. Now, Tom Stewart's getting all the plaudits and well-deserved All-Australian and all those sorts of things. But we obviously see there's more and more teams that are putting time into him and how to negate him. And the beautiful thing is that Zach Guthrie is playing the exact same role. So we're kind of at a point where if one doesn't get you, the other will. And teams aren't putting the same amount of time into Zach Guthrie. So if Tom Stewart happens to get off the hook, then they both get off the hook. And I think because they can both float in like that, on that more accountable side of the conversation, you can have one afford to sacrifice their game a bit to squash Charlie Cameron, or to try to stop Lincoln McCarthy from getting some hang time, or to get in Joe's way, or whatever the case happens to be, to support the Sam De Konings and Jack Henrys and all those sorts of guys. And the other can still do what needs to be done. They can clear the ball fast. They can be that link player that then runs 20, kicks at 40. And gets us moving up the ground. I think that's this beautiful thing about the dynamic that's come together. And I think Zach Guthrie is actually incredibly underrated how important he's been to Geelong's success this year, because he has given us that versatility. He's given us that other option.
I think I saw something when obviously Stewart got suspended for the 4 weeks this year, and they did a comparison on the 4 games he missed this year and the multiple games he missed at the end of last season due to injury. And I think, we didn't lose a game, or maybe only dropped to one of 4 or 5 that Stewart missed this year, compared to we probably broke even, or whatever it was, we lost.
I think we won them all, I think.
Yeah. So whatever it was, and you can definitely attribute 100% attribute that to Zach Guthrie, because, as you've said, they've taken the pressure off Stewart because he's got all the attention, which is fantastic.
Understandably so.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, he can soak it up. But if he can't, there's a massive young group who actually have got a bit of finals experience under their belt. Win or loss, a final's a final. We can put that under experience to help you when the season rolls around. And I think we'll probably use Jack Henry back. I think
you'd imagine so, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously we've used him forward a bit, but I just think they're multifaceted, Brisbane, which as you said, I don't think Collingwood run that deep compared to how Brisbane and a fair few other sides do.
Yeah, Collingwood relies on their midfield a bit more to get you.
Exactly, and their small forwards or whoever's running off kind of the flank to get there. But Brisbane, as I said, they're very traditional. They've got the true forwards who stay in their position and do the damage exactly where their position kind of marks them to be. So I guess it's kind of like an old school game, but I think
it'll be an interesting one to do it on the size of the MCG versus our last few encounters at Geelong.
Yeah, at Geelong. So I think we've got a chance. It was good to actually have a win, irrespective of having the bye now or whatever. I just think it's a good thing that we broke through that mental barrier of losing the qualifying, because we've lost a fair few over the years. Just to have that, and then I think we'll go into it more relaxed. I think we get so caught up in the excitement of finals, especially when we play sides who Collingwood didn't play finals last year. So
the ones we should beat.
So just like their fans are up and about, were up and about to the point of like we got all caught up in it, and then we realised when we settled in, okay, we can absorb the pressure and the crowd and the atmosphere and the intensity because we've got that experience. And I think that does people, you say whatever, and we haven't got the best finals record, but that experience, you can see that they can settle. And I think we've got through that Collingwood game, and I think we'll go into this. I think it's sold out, whatever it is, but I think we know. I think that's something that's going to help us.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's used Gary Rowan as a bit of a verbal, like a punching bag over the years, but I mean, and look, maybe some of it was even to a degree justified, but you don't think like he's learned a ton from all of those kind of failed attempts and those poorer games he's played, and was able to channel it into what became this incredible qualifying final for him, and probably now has him in really good stead for it. Like there might be that really monkey off the back style moment that he's had, and who knows how he could approach this game. And then you wonder, you touched on Reece Stanley before and his kind of fluctuating form and those sorts of things, and how important he is ultimately going to be in this game, because he is going to go against a notable and quite competent ruckman. Maybe he looks at what happened with Gary and said, he got over his curse, why can't I?
Yeah,
and maybe there's a degree of that can kind of rub off on players like Reece, and even some of those that didn't necessarily have a fantastic day in the qualifying, not because they got the yips or anything like that, but they just had a poor game or whatever the case was, or a below standard game. Hopefully that sort of stuff rubs off on people. I think there's a lot that I think the team can take from what Gary Rowan did that day and really help better some of the others who've maybe found themselves in similar positions.
I think it's really interesting because like what like my family was talking about after we beat Collingwood was we played, that wasn't our style, and that wasn't obviously the best game from everyone, but we still got the win.
Yeah.
And you'd rather win ugly than lose. So that again is another thing that they've overcome, is like, as we just discussed before, 2 years ago we wouldn't have won that game. 2 years ago at halftime we would have let it blow out,
shipped it around and played the same style. And
exactly. Yeah. And we weren't falling back into that trap should give us all a bit of hope that, and we've seen it through the home and away season, and I know that doesn't really count in the finals, but there's a different belief in Chris Scott now than I think there was, because we've during the season we usually couldn't beat Richmond or Melbourne or whoever, but we did this year. And I know they're not in the finals anymore, but
they were the top dog.
Exactly. And we should take those experiences from those games. And when we beat Brisbane earlier this year, because we weren't obviously we were slumping at the start of the season, to, go, hang on, that we weren't playing our style and we
still got the job done.
Still got the job done. So like, imagine if we play our style with our side that we have proven we can win with, who knows what damage we can do.
Yeah. Do we tag Lachie Neale?
I think so.
Shark?
Sorry?
Is it Shark that does it?
I think I am a believer in the old-fashioned tagger. I know that they say it stamps out of the game, but I just think it seems to work, right? And that's what his role is. And I think he's copped a lot of slack because, I think a lot of people look at football and they go, oh, because he didn't touch the ball, he didn't get 20 touches and goals or whatever, he's been unsuccessful. But you look at someone like a Gryan Miers or whatever, and their success is measured on things that you don't see on the AFL app, or they don't talk about, because obviously Cameron's going to kick goals and Hawkins is going to kick goals and Stewart's going to take intercept marks or whatever. But the thing is, Shark is always judged. The reason he's being picked is because they know he's able to do things, and people can go, oh, whatever, he's not up to this standard, but he's doing a job that nobody really notices. You go, oh, where's Neil?
Yeah.
He's been taken out of the game. So I think it'd
the usual metrics don't apply.
Exactly, and I think it'd be terrible if we didn't run with one, because he's been so damaging. He's just been, he got 39 touches and 15 clearances against Richmond, who I personally rate. I rated Richmond over everyone. I thought if they're in the finals, irrespective of where they are, they can do some serious damage. So for them to let that happen, and of course Neil's just that good.
Yeah.
It just makes me go. I hope. Obviously, we're not coaches, but I know they'll be looking at it.
Armchair ones.
One day maybe, but we'll be looking at that going. I know the coaches will be looking at that going. We tagged him, didn't we, when we played them earlier in the year? I think so.
Mark O'Connor went to him and squashed him.
That's right. So it's proven again, and obviously Brisbane will be expecting it. But you know what? If we can at least minimise, if it means he only gets 15 touches for a game instead of 40,
that's a huge win.
It's a win.
Yeah.
He's touching it.
He's at the heartbeat of their game.
Exactly. That's what I was kind of alluding to. I don't think their midfield runs that deep unless he's there. So if he's taken out of it, they can be beaten.
Exactly.
But I just don't think sides have been able to do the last 2 weeks haven't been able to do that. And I think a little bit of momentum's on their side, which is fine.
I just hope they've just played their grand final. I hope that last week, that semi, beating Melbourne after what happened a few weeks ago, the Petty thing, the Zorko thing, all that sort of stuff. I hope that was the grand final. And they just, this is the downer, and we can just. I don't want to smash them because I don't think that's necessarily the best thing that we can have going into a final either. But there's a really comprehensive game that we play, and we put them to the sword up to a point and kind of break down their strengths. Is the real hope there. Yeah. And the thing that you touched on when you were talking about Mark O'Connor there, and that stuff that's really immeasurable. We don't typically look at stats that represent the sorts of things that he does. That sort of stuff really gets lost. I think about the commentary around the Geelong and Collingwood game, and lots of people were talking about, Tom Hawkins didn't have a great game. He was kind of towed up by Darcy Moore. But if you go back and watch a lot of the highlights where Gary Rowan actually claimed some of those marks, like there was his big hanger, but there was even the first one he got where I think he ended up kicking the goal from about 45 out, tight angle. But the reason he got that mark is because Hawkins saw what was going on and just kind of blocked the space, positioned himself, and kept Darcy Moore out of it. And it's those sort of things that there's never going to be a stat for that, and gets unnoticed 90% of the time unless you're watching that replay maybe multiple times. Then you take your eyes off what actually happened and look around to see what also went on. You go, oh, like that's there, but no one's going to acknowledge that in the right way. And I think Mark O'Connor and the role he needs to play within the team is going to fit that bill to a T, unless he completely destroys him, at which point everyone will recognise it very, very quickly. But let's hope that's the case. But
yeah, I think, and one of the things Geelong's always been, I guess, known for is those one percenters, and recognising it. You've probably heard media stories over the years of, they in 2007, I think they had I think it was a little trophy that went around to the person who did the 1%er every week, and they thought it was the best, or they did it in 2020 as well when we were in the hub and things like that. So I know that I think and I'm not saying this as a biased supporter, I think Geelong's culture actually shines through. You can be a good football side, but to have a culture where you have everyone believing in each other, and as you've heard them all say, where Tom Atkins, who had an absolute stellar season, was saying
still thinks he's on the edge.
I'm on the edge. It's insane to me, but that's exactly what I want to hear, because they're playing for the team, for the club, for the people. And if they don't believe they're at their best, well, they're striving for it every week, which kind of, and that shows in our game. And I think when we're on, that shows in our game. We're playing for our culture.
I mean, God help the opponent if everyone on the Cats team plays the way they want to play kill 22 of them every single week in that particular game. That'll be it could be a Richmond of 2007 sort of game. Some lighter ones as we wrap things up. Who's the greatest Cat of all time that you've seen, that even you kind of have watched enough old footage of?
Okay, my favourite players ever, because they need to get their mention. I love Cameron Lee. literally my jumpers 45 on the back. I thought I'd be different and not go for Gary Ablett and all that. But
no, Lingy's a champion.
I loved Lingy. I thought he was a fantastic player. And now, obviously, my favourite player is Mitch Duncan. 22s in all my social bios and everything.
Criminally under-recognised.
Oh, well, he plays in... I think that's kind of... it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
That's the thing, and I think a lot of players back in the day, like Joel Corey, played in like a champion midfield with the Bartel and the Abletts and blah, blah, blah.
Just as important, but didn't get any of the recognition.
Exactly, and I think... Well, I'm off topic here, but I like to talk about Joel Corey. He was Patrick Cripps before Patrick Cripps was around.
Yeah.
He was the big-bodied midfielder who nobody talked about because we were a champion side back in the golden era, where he wasn't getting recognised. He never got taken out of games, and he would do the most damage. And he'd still get it 30+ times as well. Exactly, which is just unreal to me. And no one would ever bother to tag him, which is why he was so good. But even if he was taken out of it, I know he would have dominated. But the best cat I've ever seen. It's between. Now I'm just thinking. I'm pretty lucky.
There's always someone you're going to be leaving on the table here. It's not easy.
Matthew Scarlett.
Yes. Fantastic choice.
My dad was lucky to see all the Abletts, and he would probably say senior. But I mean, I think junior was fantastic, but obviously I'd throw in Jimmy Bartel or Corey Enright. But I think Matthew Scarlett was just phenomenal. He was a beast, and he was a good club person. And I always rate a person as well. Like, I love Joel Selwood, not because he's a champion player, because he's a champion person and a good club person. And you could see in all those glory days, because obviously I didn't see anyone before the early 2000s, I wasn't born, that those people bought into Geelong and the people and the culture, and it showed in the success that they had on field.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because Matthew Scarlett was a fantastic footballer, but, he would always... I always have fantastic memories of him. He hated fronting the media, but he would always stop and, sign your jumper, take a photo with you. And I think that counts towards, I guess, the greatest I've ever seen. That's how I measure it.
No, I respect that answer, and obviously he's an incredible player. So I don't think anyone could argue the point, really. Schoolyard pick style, you've got Gary Ablett Jr. and Senior standing in front of you. Who do you pick?
I'll say
I love asking the really original questions here.
It's hard. Every time I get asked about this, I'm like, because I always say to my dad and my uncle, I'm like, you're so lucky you saw Ablett, like, senior. And they're like, you're so lucky you saw a premiership at 6. Like, swoosh. We didn't see one for 44 years. I'd pick Gary Ablett senior. If we're talking about putting that person into today's game, no one would know how to. No one would know how to stop him. Senior. No way. He's a freak. He's a freak of nature. There's no way. And in today's game, which has changed so much, he would still dominate. Yeah,
100% with you. There's a flair, there's a creativity, and then there's a skill set that is largely unmatched. So fantastic choice. Of the young crop that's coming through, and obviously we've got plenty of fantastic young players, and it looks like we're about to add Tanner Bruin to that. But who's the one that you have your closest eye on that you think is going to be that next big thing? And I guess that probably disqualifies Sam DeConing, given his recent runner-up in the Rising Star there. But outside of Sam, is there anyone that you've got a particularly close eye on that you think's really, really got something?
Obviously, you could say Brad Close, but I think he's really proved himself. He's 20?
He's a cult figure at this point.
Like, he's made a name for himself, and he's proven it with his skill.
Yeah.
I hope we give Francis Evans a chance. But again, I find it difficult that he could, like, it's so hard. We have these stories all the time because, what a problem to have. We have such a...
Myers, Close and Stengel.
Yeah, right? I just think it's like we have such depth, and we always have, that it's such a problem that we can't fit these guys in. But I think I'd say I'll go with Brad Close only because he's still young. And the thing is, this young crop, I guess we can call them the mosquito in some way, they've been likened to it, isn't going anywhere for a long time, which gives me a lot of hope, and I think should give all of Cats fans a lot of hope, because we've been written off for so long for chopping up with old players and kind of squeezing as much as we can out of those players. But that's another thing about this season is we've actually blooded. You know, we played a couple of other of the young boys as well. Ollie Dempsey, I think, is another one we should keep our eyes on.
Yes.
There's a few that actually contributed that, you know, in a few years' time, like we did in 2011 and kind of as the 07-9-11 group started to retire, we found the people to fill those roles.
Yeah.
I think Geelong's too smart to not be doing that already.
Yeah, they're already thinking about it. I mean, it's no surprise that we hear Tanner Bruin, we hear Ollie Henry, and those guys are in that younger group than what we normally talk about, but they're the perfect fits to replace some of those retiring names.
I always say.
We talk about people talk about the retirement village, but that 22 was stacked with a lot of younger players.
I know, and
that gets lost.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad that Stengel got the recognition he deserved because he's
23.
23. Like,
yeah.
We haven't had somebody that young in a long time, and not that the ones that were old didn't contribute because we've had.
No, and they absolutely earned it too.
So, yeah, and I think I always say, they'll come back to Geelong in a couple of years. You know, bring them home. Like some WA player that we've never had in Geelong. Like bring them home. You know, there's always a place down the highway. But I think
fun.
Geelong's really good at being able to sell our club to young guys.
Yeah.
I think you hear a lot of stories of like, why didn't I come here sooner? Like Isaac Smith said that, but obviously he's had such success at Hawthorn. But I think one of the selling points is that no matter where you're from, Geelong can feel like home for you, especially for those young guys. I think that's what gives me a lot of hope and brings a lot of excitement is that people come to Geelong and they go, why wasn't I here sooner? You know, it's just some like sleepy hollow down the highway. Between
the culture, the beach, all of those things just tick, 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 tick. It's a really appealing
prospect. And that's
prospect.
what they always say is like the selling point is that you're not away from that Melbourne life too much, but
it's only an hour away.
Yeah, you're 5 minutes away from the beach and you can shut off. That's why Jeremy Cameron loved it. And I think it's so evident, like in Melbourne, you know, I'm a 21-year-old, I go out in Richmond and like the AFL players are always out and they're swarmed and I just don't know how they do it. And I think that's something that you can escape in Geelong, but you don't have to be away if you're from Melbourne. You don't have to be away from the football culture. You don't have to be shut off like you would be in Queensland or New South Wales. And I think that's a beautiful point we can sell to young players because in this day and age of like social media, as we said, you know, I get a bit of hate. Imagine what
does,
players get, especially the young ones. So to be able
to look at Jack Ginnivan.
Oh,
regardless of what you think about head ducking and, you know, I mean, a blatant dive with Zach Guthrie, but all those sorts of things, like the amount of rubbish that he cops is just it's awful.
And the way that he can't escape that, I think Geelong's very good at protecting our younger players from that stuff because, like, I look at a Brad Close or a Gryan Miers who does get a bit of that attention.
He was a whipping boy for a while.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, his whole family's in Geelong. He can switch off and he's with them and he's not in the Melbourne scene or the nightlife, which, you know, it's very intense in Melbourne for these young players. Every single weekend you'll see a player out and they are swarmed. And, I mean, that's just life. They just want to be normal teenagers, normal players, normal people. But that's what the beauty of our club is that we can protect those players and let them still live their life, but it doesn't have to be there's a lot less football media down in Geelong.
Yeah. So if anyone's watching that's considering playing for the Cats, there's your pitch. Just come across. Anna, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Hopefully we're celebrating, I guess in a few hours from when this goes live, hopefully we're celebrating a Geelong victory and that we're off to the big dance. And it's been awesome to have you on the show. So thank you so much for coming and sharing this love of the Cats, this journey that you're on. And I wish you nothing but the best for the future.
Thank you so much for having me. One of my favourite topics to talk about is Geelong. So any other time you want more help or discussions, I'm always here.
Glad I could indulge all of that. If people want to, I mean, as we've already discussed, you're on SEN. We've spoken about social media, but if people do want to tune into what you've got to say or check out what's up on social media, where should people go?
You can get me on Twitter. It's analyst_sports, ANNALYST.
Clever play on words.
There. Thanks, Dad. It's been very good at the back end stuff, my dad. That was one of his finest. Or just search up Anna Pav. I'm sure I'll come up somewhere.
Yep, your Instagram handle is above your head in the video version as well. So
there you go. Catch me on SEN every morning. It might sound a bit different, but it's definitely me.
Trying to contain Kane. Well, not at the moment, I guess, but
I try not to show too much of a cat's bias, but if it's a slow sport day, like it kind of was today, I was running the Tanner Bruin story all day and a bit about Jeremy Cameron just because I can.
Just because you can. Why not? You've got to, yeah. They're encouraging you to bring that out, so indulge it. Go for it.
Of course.
As I mentioned, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this. I've had an absolute blast chatting to you as well.
Thank you. I really enjoy the show and I'm looking forward to watching this back.
Yeah, and Cats fans, please make sure if you're not already doing so, subscribe to The Hoop Show on YouTube, subscribe to Behind the Play on podcast feeds, the good ones and the bad ones. We're there for on all of them. Remain Geelong strong, and hopefully we're talking next week about a grand final. Fingers crossed, everyone. We'll see you later.